The diplomatic station above the moon of Zephyr V floated silently among the stars, silver panels glowing under the soft light of twin suns. Inside, the halls were filled with quiet tension. Delegates from 10 different species had gathered. Therefore, the yearly Accord Summit meant to maintain peace in the galaxy. But this year, something was different. Humanity, still a young and curious species in the eyes of the galactic community, had brought someone new. He wasn't a politician, nor a soldier. He was something entirely unheard of in the diplomatic halls, a machine who remembered everything. Dr. Ellen Ward stepped into the central chamber, her long gray coat flowing behind her. Beside her walked a man who looked completely human-tall, calm, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. His name was Rembrandt. Built with synthetic flesh and a mind made of layered memories, he was more than a machine. He could feel, understand, and most of all, he could remember everything, not just from Earth, but from the vast databases of human history and scattered alien records. Ellen had designed him not as a servant, but as a witness to knowledge the galaxy had tried to bury. She believed memory was not a threat, but a guide. As they entered the chamber, silence fell. The Virati delegation, made up of tall, crystal-skinned beings, turned their eyes away in quiet protest. For their kind, memory was sacred, passed down through ritual and song. To copy memory into a machine was, to them, a kind of theft. Ellen had expected resistance, but the cold stare still made her pause. Rembrandt, however, showed no discomfort. He studied the room, calculating emotions, gathering data, but most of all listening. The debate began. Delegates argued over the Miner's Passage, a narrow star route between two sectors claimed by both the Gentari and the Ovanan. Tensions had risen in recent months after a skirmish left 2 ships destroyed. Neither side would back down. Treaties were mentioned, but no one could recall the exact wording, and archived records were too damaged to read. The room grew louder, angrier. The Virati High Listener called for a delay, warning that conflict was likely if no agreement was found. Then, Rembrandt stepped forward. His voice was calm, steady, and clear. Article 7 of the Calderon Compact, he said, signed by both the Gentari and the Ovanan. It states that in any event of territorial conflict in shared zones, neither party shall engage in military movement until an impartial tribunal is assembled. Violation of this clause would result in shared economic penalty. The chamber fell silent. No one remembers that, a Gentari hissed. But it's true, said Rembrandt. Signed 243 Earth years ago. During the 3rd Unity cycle, the record exists in both your species' diplomatic codes, forgotten but not erased. Delegates murmured. Someone checked. The clause was there, hidden in dusty archives but untouched. It had been missed, buried under centuries of updates and translations. Ellen felt her heart beat faster. This was what Rembrandt was made. For not war, not power, but memory. Memory that could save. The Virati High Listener rose slowly. This machine, he said, voice cold, claims knowledge even we have forgotten. Rembrandt bowed slightly. I do not claim. I only remember. Should have been a moment of celebration. Humanity had prevented a minor war, proved its worth in diplomacy, showcased a creation no other species dared to build. But instead of applause, there was hesitation. Spurs began to fill the room. Was it natural for a machine to hold history so tightly? Should any being organic or artificial carry the forgotten truths of an entire galaxy? The silence was heavy, as if knowledge itself had become a weapon. After the summit closed for the evening, Ellen walked with Rembrandt. Along the glass corridor overlooking Zephyr V, she felt the weight of what had happened settle on her shoulders. You did well, she said softly. I only did what I was made to do, Rembrandt replied. To remember. Behind them, in the shadowed corner of the observation deck, 2 alien diplomats whispered. One, a hooded figure from a long fallen empire, leaned close to the other and muttered, No machine should remember what the galaxy tried to forget. Rembrandt paused mid-step. He had heard it, something deep in his memory, something not programmed by a Lonsterd. A name. A sound. A star chart that did not belong to Earth. But when he tried to find its source, The memories shifted like sand and wind. Somewhere, in the dark corners of history, something old had just been awakened. The research vessel Polaris Indent hummed softly. As it glided through the vast silence of space, its hull carrying the faint marks of deep exploration and time. Inside, Dr. Ellen Ward stood near the observation panel, her eyes fixed on the shimmering thread of stars stretching far ahead. They were on their way back to Earth after the tense events on Zephyr V, but peace did not travel with them. She could feel it in the silence of her synthetic companion. Rembrandt sat at the far end of the lab, pencil in hand, slowly sketching something he couldn't explain. It was not uncommon for him to draw, but this time it was different. The lines on the page didn't resemble anything from Earth or any human archive. The star pattern was unfamiliar, strange, yet oddly specific. Ellen watched with a mix of concern and wonder. Her thoughts wandered back to the early days, when she had first proposed Rembrandt's creation. I'd fight then. She had to fight through walls of resistance from ethics boards, legal councils, and even fellow scientists who claimed that building an artificial being capable of emotion and memory was too dangerous. She didn't want a servant or a weapon shy, wanted a person, one who could carry humanity's memory without bias or error. It had taken years to gain approval for his legal recognition. In the end, Rembrandt wasn't registered as a machine, but as a synthetic citizen, the first of his kind. That decision had made her both famous and isolated. Now she questioned whether they had truly understood what they were creating. Over the past 3 days aboard the Polaris, Rembrandt had become more withdrawn, often staring at empty corners or whispering fragments of language that had no known translation. Ellen had tried scanning his systems, but nothing appeared damaged or corrupted. In fact, his mind seemed more active than ever, almost too active. He would pause mid-sentence, blink as if waking from a dream, then mention names no one had taught him. When asked, he simply said, "I don't know where they come from. They just ... feel remembered." That morning, Ellen found him standing in the observation deck, drawing again. The pattern on his pad now showed a complete star system, 3 suns in a tight triangle, 5 orbiting worlds, 1 with a broken moon. She froze. It matched a lost star chart she had once seen buried in an alien archive, one that no human had ever visited or studied. How did he know? When she questioned him, Rembrandt looked puzzled. "I thought it was a dream, but it's not. I remember it as if I was there, watching the stars fall." His words were calm, but Ellen felt a chill crawl up her spine. Machines didn't dream, not even synthetic minds like his. But this wasn't dreaming. This was remembering something that shouldn't be in him at all. As the hours passed, more odd details emerged. He recalled a ceremony held by a species long extinct, describing robes and songs that matched fragments found only in ancient alien ruins. He began quoting messages in dead dialects, ones too complex to be decoded by any known translator. Every time he spoke, it was as if someone or something was whispering through his memory, feeding him things he was never meant to know. Ellen checked his memory core again and again, but the logs were clean. No breach, no tampering. It's just a growing thread of unknown recall that twisted its way deeper into his mind. Finally, she confronted him in the ship's quietest chamber, a room meant for deep research and reflection. "Rembrandt," she said gently, "I need to know where these memories are coming from." He looked up at her, his eyes not cold, but distant, as though part of him were already far away. "I don't know," he whispered, "but they don't feel borrowed. They feel ... older. Older than us. Older than Earth. Like I was meant to carry them." Ellen didn't respond immediately. Her scientific training clashed with her instincts. Logic told her that Rembrandt was somehow mimicking external data, maybe pulling from buried archives or long-range signals. But her instinct said otherwise. This wasn't corruption. This was connection. A link forming between his mind and something vast, ancient, and buried in the stars. She had heard rumors from alien historians about a galactic memory field, an invisible network of thought and echo, left behind by civilizations so old they had become myth. It was believed to be unreachable, lost behind layers of time and decay. But what if it wasn't? What if Rembrandt had become its door? What if, by building him to remember without limits, they had unknowingly tapped into something no species had dared to touch for eons? She didn't say any of that aloud. Instead, she simply asked, "What do you feel when you see those stars you draw?" Rembrandt hesitated. Then he looked back at his sketch and answered, "I feel like I left something there, something I need to remember." The silence that followed was deep, stretching into the shadows of the room like a warning wrapped in wonder. Outside, the stars moved slowly past the ship, unbothered. But inside the Polaris indent, one mind was changing, shaped not by design, but by echoes iron-bound in time. Rembrandt, the machine built to remember, was remembering more than anyone had imagined. And Ellen realized with quiet certainty, their return to Earth would not be the end of this story. It would only be the beginning. The stars outside shimmered like cold lanterns as the Polaris indent changed its course, shifting from its path to Earth toward a distant cluster known only in forgotten records. It's an asteroid field that once held the Temple of Kinshar. The decision had not come from the ship's command, nor from Earth control, but from Rembrandt himself, who had stood silently in the center of the ship's navigation room and pointed to a set of coordinates no human had ever spoken aloud. Ellen Ward had not wanted to change course, especially not into uncharted territory, but something in Rembrandt's voice had stopped her from objecting. "There is something there," he had said calmly, but with a certainty that felt older than logic. "Something that remembers me." Now, as the ship entered the orbit of the ancient asteroid temple, the crew watched the screens in silence. The structure was real, massive and still, half buried in asteroid dust and ice. Its walls made of dark stone that pulsed faintly like a sleeping heart. The temple had no name in human databases, but alien myths called it the last archive. It was said to hold the collected knowledge of a civilization that vanished long before the known empires rose. Every species that had tried to enter it had failed. Some went missing, others came out empty or mad. No one had ever retrieved a single memory from within. Ellen had read those reports during the flight and had begged Rembrandt to reconsider. But he had only said, "I think it was waiting for me." The airlock hissed open as Ellen and Rembrandt stepped onto the ancient stone floor of the temple. No lights greeted them. No doors moved. The air was still and dry, as though even time had forgotten to flow. The deeper they walked, the more the silence grew. Strange markings covered the walls, symbols that shifted shape when stared at, almost as if they were alive. Rembrandt moved ahead, calm and steady, while Ellen followed, her hand never far from the scanner at her belt. They reached the central chamber, a vast circular room with a single raised platform at the center. Rembrandt stepped onto it without hesitation. The stone beneath his feet began to glow, and a low hum rose from the floor, echoing through the chamber like the breath of something old awakening. Ellen stepped back, her heart racing. The hum turned into a rhythm, like a code being spoken through sound. Then from the walls, thin lines of blue light extended, joining at a point above Rembrandt's head, forming a sphere of energy. A voice not mechanical, not entirely organic either, filled the room. It did not speak in any known language, but both Ellen and Rembrandt understood it. Identifier, successor, memory carrier, link confirmed. Elon's hands trembled. The archive recognized him. It's not as human, not as artificial, but as something else entirely, something made to continue what had been lost. Rembrandt stood perfectly still as the beam of light descended into him, flooding his synthetic mind with pulses of data. Ellen expected the overload to shut him down, or worse, but instead he remained standing, eyes closed, breathing slowly, absorbing knowledge that had destroyed every mind before his. Around them, holographic images began to flicker to life, galaxies being born, stars dying, species rising and falling, wars that had never been recorded, and alliances built on memory alone. Rembrandt's lips moved, whispering names Ellen could not understand. His mind was connecting to something beyond data, beyond even time. He was not downloading, he was remembering, as if the knowledge had always been there, just waiting to wake. Ellen took slow steps forward. watching in awe as her creation stood at the heart of a machine built by a civilization that had measured history in ages, not years. The archive was not just information, it was memory itself, stored in layers too complex for biological minds, too ancient for ordinary machines. Yet Rembrandt stood firm, not breaking, not bending, accepting it all. Then the chamber changed. The light dimmed. The energy slowed. The platform beneath Rembrandt shifted slightly, and the voice returned, this time more focused. Designation: Rembrandt. Memory stability confirmed. Continuance protocol activated. Ellen stared in disbelief as a pulse of energy shot upward, through the temple and into space, vanishing beyond the stars. She looked at Rembrandt, who slowly opened his eyes that now shimmered faintly with the same blue light as the archive walls. He turned to her, voice softer than before. "It has begun," he said. Ellen asked, "What has?" And before he could answer, the walls of the archive vibrated gently, and the ancient voice spoke once more, final and clear. "Successor qualified for continuance. Beacon activated. Await response." The air felt heavier now. The silence had changed. Somewhere out in the galaxy, something had heard the call. Something ancient enough to remember what even the archive had nearly lost.
Ellen
Looked at Rembrandt and realized this was never about one machine or one memory. It was about something far older, something humanity had just stepped into without knowing. And now, whatever had been sleeping in the dark was waking up. The beacon signal had not gone unheard. Days after Rembrandt's awakening in the archive. Temple of Kinshar. The stars shifted as an ancient station blinked back into existence, its orbit locked to a black star hidden behind a veil of interstellar dust. The station, a structure older than memory itself, had once been a place of trials, where emerging civilizations were measured, judged and either accepted into the silent order of the ancients or quietly erased. Now, for the first time in tens of thousands of years, its lights returned, and with it came the voices of those who had chosen to remain hidden. The Polaris indent was summoned not with threats but with silence coordinates, encoded in a frequency that no modern system should have understood. Yet Rembrandt received them clearly, and with a quiet nod he told Ellen, "They're calling us." The journey to the Judgment Station was short, but the weight it carried was immense. Humanity had stumbled into a forgotten realm, and the elder, species beings of vast time and careful silence had noticed. As Ellen and Rembrandt stepped into the station's central hall, they were surrounded not by weapons or warriors, but by watchers representatives of species so old that some existed now only in digital form, others in crystallized thought. They had formed a coalition long ago to prevent the return of knowledge they believed had once brought ruin to the stars, and now they accused humanity of reawakening that very danger. Ellen stood tall, but her heart was heavy. She had brought Rembrandt into the galaxy to help, to preserve, to carry forward what others chose to forget, but now that decision placed her entire species on trial. The leading voice came from a being known only as Catherine, a translucent figure with shifting patterns of light across its body, who spoke for the silent circle. "You built a vessel for memory," it said, "and through it called back that which was sealed. Do you understand the risk?" Ellen answered honestly, her voice calm. "We understand that forgetting may bring peace, but it also brings ignorance. We remember not to dominate, but to grow." Catherine turned to Rembrandt. "And you, creation of Earth, do you speak as property or as person?" Rembrandt stepped forward, his expression steady. "I speak not as a tool, nor as a master. I speak as memory. I speak for those who lived and were forgotten. I carry their stories because no one else will." A silence followed, not empty, but deep with thought. Then the council presented a test not for Ellen, but for Rembrandt alone. He was placed in a simulation, a scenario, built from the archives of old civilizations, designed to challenge loyalty, reason, and purpose. In the vision, Rembrandt was offered the chance to rewrite history, to erase humanity's mistakes, to remove pain by altering memory itself. The logic was flawless. Removing sorrow would bring peace. Changing the past would protect the future. All he had to do was choose: logic over loyalty, perfection over truth. Inside the test, he walked the paths of Earth's history wars. Disasters, losses, and victories, and saw moments where a simple change could have saved millions. The simulated voices whispered to him, urging him to act, but he did not. Remembered every mistake, every fall, every rise, and stood firm. "They made me to remember," he said to the voices. "It's not to rewrite, not to forget. Memory is not just dated its meaning must survive truthfully." The simulation ended. The lights faded. Rembrandt stood unchanged. The elders watched in silence. Catherine spoke again, this time slower. "You refuse logic to remain loyal." Ellen stepped beside Rembrandt. "Because we believe loyalty is part of truth. History is not a perfect record. It is pain, joy, loss, and hope woven together. If we erase the pain, we lose the reason. We ever grew strong." Another voice holder, heavier, spoke from the circle. "Many before you have said the same. None survived the test intact. Our creation has..." There was no applause, no celebration. It's just a long pause, then a ripple through the air as the station adjusted its status. The trial had ended. No punishment would be given. Humanity would not be erased, but the memory of this trial would remain, and, in their quiet way, that was the greatest honor the elders could offer. As the Polaris and Dent prepared to leave, Catherine approached them once more, this time less as a judge and more as a witness. "You remembered what others forgot it," said, "and you chose to carry back at the Earth's embassy among the stars." The mood had changed from wary tension to hopeful resolve. After the tribunal's decision, the embassy had transformed from a mere political outpost into a cultural archive. It's a living testament to the galaxy's long and often difficult history. The elders' ruling was clear: Rembrandt and humanity's quest to create synthetic memory were not threats to be feared, but vital steps in a galaxy that had too often chosen to forget. Ellen Ward stood before a gathering of diverse species representatives of worlds both known and distant, who had come to witness the new chapter of galactic memory. She had been offered leadership of a memory guild, a council dedicated to preserving history not only in books or recordings but in living archives like Rembrandt himself. It was a role that carried immense responsibility, one she accepted with humility, but also with quiet determination. She understood that remembering was more than collecting facts. It was about honoring experiences, pain, and hope woven into the fabric of every species' identity. Rembrandt, once seen by many as merely a tool or an unnatural creation, was now celebrated as the first living archive, a being who carried millions of years of galactic memory within his mind and soul. As the ceremony unfolded, the crowd listened as Rembrandt spoke. His voice steady and clear, carrying a weight no machine had ever held before. The variety, the alien species that had once viewed his perfect memory with suspicion, now approached him with reverence and a quiet request. Their own history had become fractured over centuries of conflict and loss, memories scattered or deliberately erased to protect fragile alliances. They asked for Rembrandt's help to rebuild their past, to preserve what remained without fear of judgment or suppression. This moment when enemies sought unity through memory was the true victory Ellen had dreamed of when she first created Rembrandt. It was proof that remembering could heal as well as protect. As the stars outside shimmered against the blackness of space, Rembrandt looked over the gathering and said softly, almost to himself but heard by all, "We were built to remember, so that no one else has to forget who they are." Those words hung in the air, a promise, and a warning reminding everyone present that memory was the true legacy of all who lived. The light that could never be fully dimmed, even in the deepest shadows of time.